What's going on, everybody? Today we are going to go over tips for beginner drywallers. This is just a quick overview on some tools, some tips, tricks, and stuff that'll help make your first project much easier. So let's go ahead and get started. The first step is going to be picking out the drywall that you want to use. We chose this. It's a mold and mildew resistant drywall, and we did that because we are not going to be climate controlling the garage like we do inside a home. So we use this. And another thing to take into consideration is the fact that it is out here. The insulation we're using in the attic did not have backing paper on it. So before we did that, we actually used our drywall lift to help put up a plastic sheeting that'll act as our vapor barrier to help keep moisture out of the garage. The next thing you're going to need for drywalling is going to be a contractor pencil. That way you can mark all your cuts. A good razor blade, make sure to have a bunch of blades to swap out. It makes it much easier. And then also invest in a T-square like this. That way you can measure straight across an entire sheet, making your cuts a lot straighter, quicker, and more accurate. So it will save you a ton of time. Here's the one that we've been using. It's pretty basic, and it's nice because this end will drop down right over the edge of the drywall and hold it into place. So you can make your mark, and then you can follow that with your razor blade to make your cut. And when cutting your drywall, you always want to cut on the outside facing edge with your razor blade. And after you score it, you're able to bend and snap it, and then you can cut the paper on the back side. So it always makes it a little bit easier to use the T-square to start your cut and give you a straight line to follow. So if you haven't done it before, you should probably grab a few little scrap pieces and practice making a few cuts. You're going to want to start by just scoring the exterior part of the drywall. 1 or 2 times is plenty. And then that way, you will then be able to lift up the sheet, bend it, and then you'll take your razor and run straight across that seam to separate your piece. Once you start measuring and cutting your pieces, you will be set to start hanging the drywall. And there's a few things that make this job a lot easier. And if you have the ability, I highly recommend purchasing a drywall lift. If you're doing ceilings or working alone, it's great. But even with us, we had a few people helping out, and this just saves a lot of wear and tear and tons of time being able to set a sheet on here, crank it up. We actually also use this lift. I'll toss in a clip real quick of running the plastic sheeting across the roof. We just strapped a 2x4 across it, ran the plastic above it, and then we were able to just roll it all the way down while we stapled that to the ceiling. So you can see some of that plastic here. That is going right up against the drywall and creating our vapor barrier for the garage. So drywall lift. If you can, go ahead and pick one of those up. We got this one from Harbor Freight, I believe, and it is definitely made this job a lot easier. The nice thing about this drywall lift is that you are able to not only raise and lower this, but it does have wheels on the bottom, so you can move your sheets into place as well as spin the top, and that makes for a super easy installation. The next thing you're going to need to do is make sure you have plenty of drywall screws. Here's what they look like. And you're also going to want to make sure that you're not just using your drill with a standard tip. Here you can see we've used a drywall screw bit on the end of ours, and it gives it this little bit of a ring. And what that does is make sure that your screw is going all the way into the drywall, yet it's not pulling itself through. So you can see here, without the drywall bit, your screw is going to go through the front paper and work its way into the middle of the drywall. So having this keeps the screw up on top, holding the entire sheet. This can have the opportunity to back off the wall, and you're going to also have to use a lot more mud to fill that in, and it's not working to its full potential. Now that we went over the basics on how to hang the sheets, we're gonna look at where to hang the sheets. So on a wall, you wanna start in the middle of a stud so that each end of the drywall is actually attached to a 2x4. You don't wanna span a gap and start in the middle just because that's where your wall goes. So over here, you can see we have smaller sheets because the wall did not run a full length, so we started our sheet a little bit off the wall, allowing us to start on a 2x4 and finish with just a filler piece so that over here at this end, past the window, when the sheet ended, it would also land on a 2x4. And there are a couple different ways to go about landing your corners. There are drywalls that are recommended to go all 4 corners, but I will say it is much easier to, if possible, end with 3 points matching than trying to match 4 points. So this spot right here with 4 is going to be a little bit more difficult to finish than one with only 3. We do run the same seam across the entire wall, but running the boards horizontal versus vertical gives us a lot less seams that we have to deal with. For cuts on drywall that's already in place, we use this drywall saw, and we were able to put the first sheet in, trim right along the windowsill, and cut all around here. This will actually be trimmed out in wood afterwards, so we weren't super worried about the edge, and that way we didn't have to cut it with a box cutter and hope that we made it the exact size in case we did need to shift anything left or right. We get a clean cut and super tight on the edges with that. So after everything is hung up and ready to go, you're gonna need a few more things. The first being drywall compound. We got this mid-weight one so that it's thin enough that we can use it for our skim coat, as we don't have any really big recessed areas that we need to fill in with the heavier duty kind. We are gonna be using a tray to hold our drywall compound. You can also use one of these troughs. They're nice. They have a sharp edge on the side so that you can clean off the last tool you're gonna need, which is a trowel. They have a bunch of different sizes of these. This one is the one that we will use to go over all the screw heads, as well as over the tape that we are using on the joints. And that tape that we're gonna use is going to be the mesh tape. Now, a lot of the drywall pros will use the paper tape. They'll coat that in the drywall compound on both sides and run that for their seams. And because I am not an expert on drywall and I need something that is more forgiving, we go ahead and use the mesh. And what I like about that is, one, as you can see here, it is mesh. And the best part of that is when you go to put it on here, you are able to push the drywall compound all the way through to both sides so that you are not getting any air bubbles like you may run the risk with the paper tape. The other nice thing about this is that it is tacky on one side. So it will hold into place, and you can follow that up with putting drywall compound on it. Less is always gonna be more with drywall. You're not going to wanna leave a huge clump over each screw head. If you can, leave a nice thin coat, making sure that you get all the air out, and that will allow you to have to sand much less, because all of this extra, although it covers everything, is going to need to be sanded away at the end. So you want to split the mesh tape half and half on the seam, and then when you're done at the very end, you can always just use your putty knife to hold it down to cut the remainder of the tape, and then you are ready for mud. And with this step, you can go pretty heavy with the drywall compound, but you do want to limit how much you leave on at the very end so that you don't have to sand as much off. So here's what the first coat looks like, and if you feel it necessary, you can always go back and add more to level it out. But so to wrap everything up, you're gonna start covering all your screw holes, then you'll move to the joints. We like the mesh tape, it's easy for us to use. Then at the very end, we'll go ahead and do a skim coat with a larger trowel to feather out all the joints, and it'll look like it's never there once it's painted. All All right, well, I hope you guys enjoyed watching. We got to finish the rest of this, so we're gonna get to work. But yeah, it's definitely something anybody can do. You just have to research a little bit on all the steps. There are a lot of things that'll make your life a lot easier and your project look a lot better. I'm not an expert. This is just a beginner's guide, and there's a few things I picked up along the way and I thought I'd share. So if you guys liked, go ahead and subscribe. Don't forget to like this video, and we'll see you guys next time.